Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vijay Gokhale. I am Senior Non-Resident Fellow at Carnegie India, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to all of you today on the topic of the Indo-Pacific at the 6th edition of the Global Technology Summit. On the 1st of June 2018, the Prime Minister of India elaborated his views and his vision of the Indo-Pacific. And this is a vision which is now shared by multiple actors across our region. Together, we are trying to build a 21st community for common prosperity and shared security. I believe this is an idea whose time has come, because in the past half century, the center of the world's economic gravity is steadily shifting eastwards. Modern technology, including digital technology, has made it possible to reconnect the Indian and Pacific Ocean regions in a seamless geographical space that is not divided by artificial geopolitical barriers that colonialism had erected. And it is vital for the region's well-being to keep it this way. There is, of course, more than one Indo-Pacific approach or vision in our region, and that is all right. It is important that this idea develops organically through consultation and with the involvement of all stakeholders in the region. That will make it more sustainable and resilient. The narrative that the Indo-Pacific vision is a Western proposition needs to be challenged. First, no outside party is now in a position to impose their ideas on the states of the Indo-Pacific region. Second, the Indo-Pacific idea itself is rooted in the basic needs and interests of the Indo-Pacific states. And third, of course, this is a multilateral process. Now, Quad is one of the plurilateral mechanisms that is anchored in the Indo-Pacific vision, and therefore attempts to confuse the two should be resisted. 4 countries, the United States, India, Japan, and Australia, who have both a significant presence in the region and abiding interests here, have come together, and as the joint statement issued by the 4 leaders at the Quad Summit in September 2021 says, that is because the Indo-Pacific is a bedrock of our shared security and prosperity. Quad's future, to my mind, lies in 3 directions. First, Quad's future lies in recommitting to promoting a free, open, rules-based order rooted in international law. And there is nothing wrong in a rules-based order. The United Nations and Bretton Woods institutions are based on this idea. Quad countries will need to evolve proposals, however, on how this rules-based order can be built in practical and inclusive ways. It is important to explain the idea and purpose behind Quad to other stakeholders of the region, including groups like ASEAN and BIMSTEC, so that they see it in a proper perspective. Diplomatic legwork will therefore be required. Quad's future, secondly, lies in demonstrating its value to the region in times of need or stress. COVID-19 response and relief makes a new focus for Quad, and the Quad Vaccine Experts Group is a solid beginning. Over 1.2 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine are slated to be delivered by these 4 countries to the Indo-Pacific region. But more importantly, the experience gained can be used to build an effective response mechanism to disaster relief and humanitarian assistance in future, and to develop standard operating procedures for Quad's collaboration with other Indo-Pacific partners, not just on pandemics or on natural disasters, but on more long-term issues like climate change and digital security. Quad's future, thirdly, lies in establishing cooperation on critical and emerging technologies to ensure that these are designed, developed, and governed in transparent ways. This will mean working with a range of governments, public and private partners to develop technical standards and to build supply chains that are open and not based on political preferences of some parties. The new Quad infrastructure partnership that was announced at the September 2021 Quad Summit will therefore need to be given substance and offer terms and conditions that match the aspirations of regional countries. And that includes being sensitive to regional concerns and practices. In sum, therefore, I would say that the establishment of Quad and the holding of two summits in 2021, the second one of which was an in-person summit, is an excellent beginning, but a lot of work lies ahead in ensuring that we translate the ideas and vision of the leadership, which was expressed in the joint statement in September 2021, on the ground in practical and realistic ways. Sagar, which stands for security and growth for all in the region, was a vision outlined by the Prime Minister in March 2015. It is not simply a bold idea to reconnect India with its maritime domain. It actually represents a fundamental change in the strategic mindset. The veil of sea blindness has been lifted, and Indians who had forgotten their maritime history will now be able to see much more clearly that the oceans around India will be critical for growth and security going forward. Now, some important steps have already been taken to materialize the idea of Sagar. Diplomatically speaking, we have stronger ties with Indian Ocean states, countries like the Seychelles, Madagascar, Comoros, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and so on. We have greater Indian activism in the Indian Ocean Region Association. There are new plurilateral mechanisms, such as the one between India, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives on maritime issues, or the very recent four-party meeting between India, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and the United States on matters relating to economic cooperation and maritime security in the Middle East. More importantly, India's development partnerships in the region have matured, with countries like Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Mauritius, and some of the East African countries. Our development partnerships are now targeted to satisfying the aspirations of the recipient countries and their populations. In 2017, the Government of India also set up an island development agency under the Home Ministry to look at holistic development of the more than 1,000 islands that belong to India in the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean. This was in fact the first time that a comprehensive survey of India's island territories were undertaken. And at the moment, there are plans to develop connectivity between these islands and between the islands and the mainland of India, including digital connectivity through submarine cable. The Sagar project also involves the Sagarmala Development Company Limited. This was set up to promote port-led development, including port-linked industrialization, coastal community development, and inland waterways and coastal waterways. And under this project, more than 500 specific projects have been identified. So quite a lot of work is in progress under the concept of Sagar, which ranges from diplomatic work to developmental work. But there is one critical area where more needs to be done, and that is in the underwater domain awareness area. New technologies have recently been developed, including unmanned underwater vehicles, as well as technologies related to fishing and seabed mining, which have, of course, vastly increased economic potential, but also pose security challenges and environmental problems. And therefore, it needs a whole of government approach, covering, of course, the defense and security establishments, but also port development and shipping authorities, environmental experts, the populations in the islands themselves, the fishermen, and so on. There is a need for us to build strong capabilities in areas like oceanic hydrography, for instance, or to develop new technologies like deep sea sensor technology or deep seabed mining technology, which will require significant new investments in R&D and in science and technology. So overall, I would say that one of the areas that the Global Technology Summit would focus upon was on how we use the new technologies in the underwater domain to strengthen this particular element of Prime Minister's Sagar vision. The 21st century will be the age of digital technology, and therefore simply surface connectivity or air connectivity between India and other parts of the Indo-Pacific will not be adequate. There is a need to digitally connect India to different parts of the Indo-Pacific. And this really involves two different aspects. One is building the communications channels for digital technology, whether they are underwater cables or satellite connectivity. The second, of course, is combating cyber threats, which endanger the security of states as well as the economies of countries. What needs to be done in this regard? I believe, first of all, a resilient supply chain for semiconductors needs to be established in the region to reduce dependencies on one country. Research and development is required to build this hardware infrastructure, especially in India. And I believe that the Indian side is looking actively at the possibility of now building this hardware infrastructure to connect it to the strong software capabilities that India has in the ICT sector. Secondly, underseas communication cables are going to be the avenues for digital technology in the future. They will carry 95% of global data by the end of this decade. And there are just a few countries which control significant parts of the supply chain for undersea cables. It is therefore a pressing need, I believe, for India to establish a joint venture with private players or with governments of other countries to create an infrastructure provider for undersea cables in the Indo-Pacific region. Thirdly, besides the hard infrastructure, India needs to get much more involved and must play a much more active role in standard setting, in the International Telecommunications Union and in other multilateral rule-setting bodies. Ultimately, it is the standards that will be set in the next 10 to 15 years, which will determine the parameters of the digital revolution. And if India is to benefit from this digital revolution in terms of allowing for free flow of information and connectivity with the region, then we must be part of that standard setting exercise. Fourthly, it must become a part of the Quad strategy to develop sixth generation technology in telecommunications. Here, for the manufacturing of 6G telecommunications technology, India can certainly position itself as a hub of manufacturing, not just for the Indian subcontinent, but for the entire Indo-Pacific region. India must also become involved in finding new ways to utilize space technology for this purpose. And again, here too, India's long experience in the peaceful uses of outer space, and particularly in telecommunications satellite technology, will be helpful to this process. Finally, fintech or financial technology is going to be one of the main drivers of the world's economy. And here too, India has demonstrated significant capabilities in the last few years. Just a few examples include the UPI payment system, the Aadhaar card, the RuPay, which is the Indian credit card abroad, and of course, most recently, the CoWIN app, where 1 billion Indians are able to generate certificates of their vaccinations in real time just through the use of technology. So financial technology is an area of Indian strength. This is where we can collaborate with the region as a whole. We can provide the infrastructure for the region. We can provide the ideas for the region. To some extent, data localization poses some challenges, but this, I believe, is a problem that can be finished through discussion. In overall terms, I think, therefore, India has a significant role to play in connecting the world and particularly the Indo-Pacific through digital means, both on the infrastructure or hardware side and in terms of the software technologies and in the realm of R&D.